Despite what many players claim, sticky spam is not single-dimensional button mashing. There is definitely button mashing involved, but there is also a lot of strategy and nuance. In fact, I would argue that the sticky bomb launcher has one of the highest skill ceilings of any weapon in TF2, although the purpose of this video is not to talk about skill ceilings or floors. With this video, I hope to give an in-depth explanation for how to use the sticky bomb launcher to its fullest potential in direct combat, as well as explain why sticky bombs are so oppressive. I have mentioned the fact that Demoman is overpowered on this channel before, but I haven't really commented much on why. I have plans to make a different video specifically for sticky traps, but of course you can't mention sticky spam without at least mentioning traps, simply because of how the sticky bomb launcher works. Also, you might have noticed that in all of my background clips so far, I have also been using the Iron Bomber. I think that most people associate sticky spam with just a sticky bomb launcher, but in my experience, effective sticky spam utilizes Demoman's grenade launcher quite a bit, so in most of my gameplay you will see me switching between the two frequently. I'll explain why this is the case later in this video, but for now I want to focus on the sticky bomb launcher. Speaking of how things work, let me briefly mention the three most important characteristics of the sticky bomb launcher. Firstly, you manually detonate stickies with alt fire, which is just right click by default. The ability to choose exactly when his sticky bombs explode is the backbone of sticky spam and the Demoman class as a whole. This seemingly innocuous stat line is what sets Demoman apart from the other classes in many ways. For the viewers who are somewhat new to TF2, or even to those who have been playing for a while, you may be unimpressed, but as this video goes on, perhaps you will see why I'm emphasizing this so much. The second important aspect of sticky bombs that I have to mention here is that they travel in an arc. This might seem like a downside at first because it takes additional practice to get the hang of aiming sticky bombs at different ranges, but the projectile arc gives Demoman a number of advantages when compared to projectiles that travel in a straight line, such as rockets. This characteristic, when combined with choosing when to detonate, means that Demoman can abuse map geometry to protect his hitbox while still dealing maximum damage. This use of map geometry can be partially abused by grenades, but it is less effective due to the lack of control over when the grenade detonates, as well as the need to land directs for significant damage. Finally, sticky bombs have an arm time. Once a sticky is fired, the demo must wait roughly 0.7 seconds before the bomb can be detonated. This is both a downside and an upside, and I will be mentioning arm time many times throughout this video. Before I move on, I want to point out two realities that come with these stat lines. Because of the projectile arc and the ability to detonate the bombs at any time after the arm time, Demoman is able to abuse map geometry better than any other character. For example, you do not need line of sight at all to deal damage, meaning you can arc your stickies over the rock on Viaduct, over the hill on Upward First, and many other places. This ability is extremely powerful. It gives Demoman a significant advantage when fighting most other classes. Almost every other class in TF2 needs line of sight to deal damage, with the only real exception being Soldier. Sure, Engineer can wrangle rockets, and Pyro has his flare guns, but for the most part Demoman has the monopoly on killing things without actually seeing them. This means Demoman is able to position himself to allow him to deal huge damage without the risk of taking much damage. In other videos, specifically my Highlander Demoman guide, I have talked about how damage leads to frags, which lead to map control, which lead to your team completing the objective. The ability to consistently deal much more damage than you are taking is going to help your team immensely. The final point that I need to make in this section is one that you have probably heard, but I'm going to say it anyways because it's important. Because of how sticky bombs work, Demoman has a sweet spot. There exists a perfect range where his stickies reach his target right as their arm timer is up. Demoman is still somewhat effective at long ranges, more so than most other classes, but he absolutely thrives at this sweet spot. Of course, Demoman is capable of dealing damage at close range, but because of a sticky's arm time, as well as the risk of self-damage, this is not an ideal range. Because of the nature of sticky bombs, there are a few different ways they can be aimed in direct combat. The first method is what I will refer to as single det spam. This is exactly what it sounds like. You detonate each singular sticky when it is armed and able to hit the target. This style exemplifies the mid-range sweet spot perfectly. If you're playing at the right range, your sticky bomb will be armed and ready to explode right as it lands at the feet of your target. If you're too close, the sticky won't be armed by the time it is in range of the target and will fly by before it can be detonated. If you are too far away, the sticky will be able to be detonated as it reaches the target, but you will have to waste time waiting to fire your next sticky. Also, projectiles are just much harder to aim at these longer ranges. So playing at the perfect range allows for optimal spam. And when I say spam here, I really mean it. Because sticky bombs take 0.7 seconds to arm, you are able to fire a second sticky bomb and detonate the first sticky as the second one is still traveling. This is confusing wording, but I couldn't think of a better way to say it, so I'll play an example here so you can see exactly what I mean. This is an important technique for two main reasons. By firing your stickies on cooldown, you are increasing your damage per second. If you wait until after detonating your first sticky to fire another, you are going to be doing less damage than if you fire them in this fashion. Secondly, once you have a decent amount of experience as Demoman, you can realize when a sticky is basically a guaranteed kill and switch targets before the first bomb explodes. Being able to continue to deal the maximum possible damage while switching targets is very useful, and when combined with the fact that Demoman has two extremely capable weapons, it means that he is a fantastic multitasker. When you compare Demo's ability to multitask to a class like Heavy, who has to move his mouse to another target when he wants to change focuses, you might start to see why Demoman is the best damage dealing class in the game. I find myself using this style of spamming stickies on cooldown very frequently. There's a bit of a learning curve to this method because the timing is a bit awkward, almost like a drunken stumble, which is perfect considering the lore. That being said, the mouse inputs are pretty simple, just 2 left clicks followed by right-left alternating. Once you get the hang of it, implementing this technique into your gameplay is going to help you in the long run. This is definitely off topic, but I can't help but mention it here as well. You can also implement this into sticky jumping. Anyways, single death spam is most effective while shooting at slow-moving or stationary targets such as a heavy or a sentry, but it can also be effective at shooting faster-moving but predictable targets like a free-to-play scout or a WM1 Pyro. I should probably mention here that just because you have the option to immediately detonate doesn't mean that you have to. If you are spamming a sentry gun that is being tanked by an engineer, it might be quicker to stack up 2 or 3 stickies onto the sentry before you detonate to guarantee the kill with burst damage. This segues nicely into another point I need to make. The type of aiming you're using depends heavily on the situation as well as the opponents. Both determining how to use your stickies as well as quickly switching between the 2 different methods will eventually become second nature. For example, when I'm aiming to single det my stickies, sometimes I miss by a bit. Depending on the situation, I can transition into the second style of aiming quite easily. This second style is still pretty spammy, but instead of instantly detonating, you continue to fire your stickies to limit your opponent's movement and wait until you are guaranteed damage before detonating. I usually refer to this as zoning. Zoning is effective against fast-moving targets or even slower-moving targets that are good at using their movement to trick you into missing. Or if you simply just missed your first shot, you can leave it where it is instead of detonating it right away and use it as the first sticky in your web of damage. The approach to this style of aiming is a simple concept, but it is very difficult to master. Essentially, your goal is to trap your opponents by limiting their movement 1 bomb at a time until their movement is so limited that landing a direct grenade is simple or they have to walk over your traps and eat a ton of damage. I am absolutely awful at chess, but for some reason the concept of trapping a queen in chess comes to mind here. You can imagine your sticky bombs as pawns and pieces that prevent the enemy player, in this case the queen, from moving to certain areas. Eventually, with enough patience and proper play, you can land the killing blow that your opponent has no choice but to accept. Similarly to chess, less experienced players will blunder onto a sticky bomb far before they are actually trapped, so you can obviously detonate at this point for the free damage. This type of aiming seems pretty straightforward, but in practice it is actually quite difficult. The order in which you place your stickies, as well as where you actually put them, is heavily dependent on the class and the player. Keep in mind that the faster moving the class, the wider the web of sticky bombs must be. Speaking of fast-moving classes, Scout, Soldier, Pyro, and even Demoman all have vertical mobility options as well, so you will have to keep that in mind. Your opponents also have the ability to move your stuck bombs, or delete them entirely by shooting them with a hit-scan weapon. All of these factors make zoning difficult in practice, but there is some good news. Because the rest of your team exists, the other player isn't able to focus all of their attention on just you, so even very experienced players usually make a mistake and end up taking damage earlier than absolutely necessary. While this method of aiming is complex, once mastered it provides guaranteed damage against hard to hit targets, assuming you can stay alive long enough to trap them. Here is my advice for aiming this way. First, you want to evaluate if your opponent is able to close the distance and kill you very quickly. If this is the case, you will want to use your first sticky or two to prevent this from happening. Once you have prevented their initial approach, you will want to continue to cut off more indirect approaches while also limiting escape routes. At this point, if your opponent has tried to close the gap on you, then they probably should have already been hit by one or more of your bombs, or at least put themselves into a situation where you can lob a sticky behind them to guarantee damage. For example, some scouts like to run at a Demoman when they spot him. In this case, the best play is to put stickies between you and him first so he can't just murder you instantly, and then try to damage him with the next couple of bombs. Not all scouts behave in this way though. I have played against a lot of scouts who prefer to stay at a longer range and just chip you down while they would avoid your spam, so putting more than one or two stickies between you isn't worth the ammo against this playstyle. In general, the ideal strategy will change depending on how your opponent acts. A great deal of aim on Demoman is prediction, and recognizing patterns will help with predicting things. Remembering how a certain scout likes to play can help you in future engagements with that scout. While on the topic of scouts, I should mention that as a Demoman, you will usually have to rely on your positioning and your team to prevent you from getting killed by a scout. Scout just has so many movement options that he is very difficult to keep contained on your own. Fortunately for us demo players, this is Team Fortress 2. Oftentimes, simply preventing an enemy scout from moving in one or two directions will be enough for your team to clean him up instead of having to completely trap him in a web of stickies. Anyways, moving on to the third aim type. This method is distinct from what I have already talked about, but it can utilize either single deading or zoning. Instead of aiming to deal with a single target, this type of aim focuses on spamming an area. Knowing when to shoot an area, as well as what areas to shoot, can be difficult, but hopefully some of the background examples I am playing can help shed light on the concept at least a little bit. As always, I'll do my absolute best to explain. Like so many things in TF2, where to shoot is often going to depend on the skill of your opponents. For example, new engineer players like to build a sentry nest in this cubby on upward first. This is a great spot to pre-fire a sticky, detonate, and if you hear a hit sound, you can single det spam them. Obviously, the difference here is you're aiming to damage anything in an area as opposed to aiming for a certain player. Another similar example is concrete on viaduct. For some reason, teams love to congregate here, so if you spot the other team doing this, it is a pretty easy way to get essentially free kills. You can still shoot areas like this against more competent players, although you're not going to find any competent players hiding in a corner. For that reason, you will usually have to spam multiple stickies prior to detonating, essentially using the zoning aim type on that area. Upward is a great example of this concept of shooting areas because there are tons of places that are good to spam. Shooting left or right hill on second defense, or the cart on third and last come to mind. Shooting stickies into U-turn, or this useful spam angle on roller coaster are more spots on upward. There are tons of these, like everywhere. Knowing when to shoot a player versus when to shoot an area is largely up to game sense and map knowledge, but if you see multiple players bunched up, that's usually a good sign to focus on getting AoE damage as opposed to single target burst. Another common situation that I find myself spamming an area is when I know that an area is safe from another threat, such as a sentry gun or a sniper. If the other team is trying to push the cart that is being watched by a level 3 sentry, all you have to do is shoot the area behind the cart that the sentry is blind to. From there, either you will secure the frags, or the cart pushers will be juggled up into the gun's line of sight. This isn't just limited to payload either. Many times, a sentry gun will watch an area, and the other team is going to want it dead badly. You can help your engineer by spamming the locations that the other team is trying to shoot the gun from. I am almost done talking about aim types, but I have to address the elephant in the room here. You can charge your stickies. Don't get me wrong, this certainly has its uses. If I have all my ammo loaded, I'll sometimes preemptively charge a sticky, which can be very useful. I also find myself charging stickies to snipe low HP enemies from across the map, which is extremely satisfying. Partially charging a sticky is also useful to clean up somebody who is retreating from the front lines. All that being said, during teamfights I almost never charge stickies, mostly because you can simply get extra range by flicking your mouse upward or just aiming higher. Jumping will also further increase the range you fire your stickies if you shoot the sticky when you're at the highest point of your jump. Unlike aiming upwards or jumping, charging a sticky takes time, which effectively reduces your damage per second and slows down your reloading. Only very astute viewers will be able to piece together the situation where both of these downsides don't matter at all, which happens to be the one time I find charging stickies to be the absolute best way to aim. Yeah, it feels like the charge mechanic was pretty much made with the Kritzkrieg in mind. Alright, last point about aiming. I think the viability of charging stickies can be somewhat map dependent since charging stickies seems to be more useful on modes with large maps such as 5CP, but I usually play Payload and King of the Hill in casual. Now that I have covered how I aim, I have to emphasize the importance of ammo management. In my experience, ammo management on Demoman is difficult. Demoman has a lot of ammo, so it takes quite a while to reload it all, and it can be easy to forget to reload in the first place because there are just so many things to be thinking about. Thankfully, ammo management can be improved upon by gradually making habits out of small efficiencies. For example, instead of charging stickies for distance, aim higher up. Just like Soldier, Demo can benefit from waiting a second to allow the reload animation to finish before firing another projectile. Another great tip is to avoid using more stickies than necessary on sticky traps or finishing off weak players. A sticky trap meant to get a frag should really never be more than 4 stickies, and 3 or even 2 will usually get the job done. Also, if you juggle someone into the air, consider simply placing a sticky or 2 where they are going to land instead of wasting ammo on missing the air shot. But of course, if you're going to hit the air shot, you should go for it. These small efficiencies can and will add up over time. Saving 1 or 2 shots every 20 seconds or so will add up to 5 or 6 pretty quickly. The second key to ammo management is to simply realize that you are unloaded and take time to reload. It can be tempting to switch to your grenades and spam them on cooldown, and for good reason. It is a viable strategy if you just hit your shots. The thing is, having more ammo loaded makes landing shots easier because of Demoman's ability to influence the enemy's movement via area denial. Before I move on, I should quickly address the age-old conundrum. Should you reload your pipes or your stickies first? In my opinion, the correct answer to this is definitely stickies, although this is a do what I say, not what I do situation because I find myself subconsciously loading all my pipes before I switch back to sticky bombs. I think the reason why I load pipes first is because it just feels good to know that you have a fully loaded grenade launcher in your back pocket, so if anybody decides to run at you, you can pull it out and bang, hit him with 2 grenades in the face. So yeah, if you're really good at landing directs, then it doesn't really matter what order you reload, I guess, but stickies are probably just better in reality. While I'm on the topic of stickies versus grenades, I need to include the obligatory "stickies are your primary weapon" section because I'm talking about Demoman. I know, the grenade launcher is in the primary weapon slot. Yes, the grenade launchers are extremely capable weapons that can function as a primary weapon, and if you're running shield, then they are a great primary. The thing is, the grenade launcher is enabled by the sticky bomb launcher, which is truly Demoman's primary weapon. I guess you could call it his primary weapon, which sounds really stupid, but I think it's actually a good description. If you find yourself disagreeing, let me make a couple of points before you brush off my argument. Firstly, as I have alluded to earlier on in this video, sticky bombs allow Demoman to influence his opponent's movement. A well-placed sticky prevents an opponent from entering its area of effect entirely unless they choose to eat a lot of damage. This is extremely useful because it enables zoning, the second style of aiming we talked about earlier, but it also makes aiming projectiles much easier. Sticky bombs essentially help Demoman guarantee damage instead of relying on intuition to land direct hit grenades. You see, most experienced players are going to see a sticky bomb shot to their left and instinctively go right. If you start an engagement with your sticky bomb launcher out, you can restrict your opponent's movement to the point that landing follow-up sticks or direct grenades is significantly easier. Even if an initial sticky bomb does no damage upon detonation, it could have influenced the fight by restricting an opponent's movement. This strategy works in your favor against less experienced players too, just in a different way. Many newer players are simply unable to pay attention to where you are shooting and are so focused on their own aim and movement that you can easily predict where they are going. By firing a sticky bomb where they are strafing, you can set yourself up with an easy sticky pipe sink. Even though you could have probably landed the first 2 grenades on the newer player, a sticky pipe combo has a similar time to kill than simply landing 2 grenades, and it retains all of the benefits of starting a fight with the sticky bomb launcher pulled out. By starting engagements with your sticky bombs pulled out, you are setting yourself up to be the most efficient at both burst damage as well as area denial. Hitting direct pipes is much harder without sticky bombs to influence movement, and a missed pipe typically ends up exploding harmlessly. On the contrary, a missed sticky bomb does not really miss until you detonate it. This is a great reason why you shouldn't instantly detonate your stickies, by the way. Remember near the start of this video when I was stressing that Demoman can choose exactly when to detonate? If you screw up and you miss a sticky bomb during a fight, many times that bomb will come in handy later on. Continuing with the topic of patiently waiting to detonate, if you manage to trap an opponent completely, you might want to wait a tiny bit longer to detonate if you think the explosion won't kill them. If a player is trapped, landing grenades is extremely easy and can secure the kill against healthier opponents. Another reason to have your sticky bombs pulled out by default. Landing an air shot with a sticky is generally a lot easier than a pipe. This one might be a bit controversial because most people, including myself, tend to go for a lot more air shots with grenades. That being said, if you know that somebody's going to be in the air in advance, sticky bombs are easier to air shot with. The reasoning behind this is similar to what I have already talked about. You choose when to detonate, so unlike with grenades, you don't have to land a direct hit with a sticky bomb in order to air shot someone. The obvious caveat here is the sticky bomb arm time. Air shotting with stickies only really works if you're expecting a soldier or Demoman to bomb at you, or you know somebody is about to be juggled up. Every class in TF2 uses the environment in one way or another. Scout uses props to get value out of his double jump and to avoid taking damage. Soldier likes to play on high ground and use walls and obstacles to rocket jump. Engineer... He places things on the ground. Heavy can head glitch, you get the point. Maps and map layout are very important in Team Fortress 2, and Demoman is no exception here. He uses the environment to his advantage in many ways. Remember how I mentioned that Demoman can shoot areas instead of individual targets? This is one such way the map influences your sticky spam. A great example is payload. A Demoman on red team is going to have opportunities to spam the cart and get a lot of free damage. There doesn't have to be an objective for this style of spam to be useful. There are many areas that are often worth spamming, such as the cubby on upward, which I have already mentioned. Side tunnel on upward second, catwalk on third, U-turn on third, and this spam angle from tracks on third are all great examples of high traffic area that can net you free damage and frags by simply shooting them. Specifically looking at the U-turn example, this is a great demonstration of another aspect of map geometry. All single fire weapons share an advantage over guns like the minigun and the flamethrower. Corners can be used to minimize the amount of damage taken from your opponent without reducing your own damage, because you can peek around the corner, shoot, and then hide around the corner again. I would argue that Demoman benefits the most out of any class from these corners because of the way the sticky bomb launcher works. Since his bombs explode, he doesn't even have to actually expose his hitbox at all to deal damage around the corner. He can simply shoot a sticky and rely on the splash damage. A good demo can abuse this and will not only use corners during fights, but also to systematically clear areas before walking too far into a point to essentially check for anybody hiding around the corner. Also, since Demo's projectiles travel in an arc, steep height differentials also act as a corner just rotated 90 degrees. Demo is very good at spamming out opponents on the high ground. Because he can detonate at any time after the arm timer is up, he can just position at his sweet spot mid-range and just single det spam the high ground player. Also, because of the unique characteristics of sticky bombs, Demo doesn't even need a corner at all to deal this no line of sight damage. As I have mentioned earlier, props such as the rock on Viaduct are perfect for arcing projectiles over to deal massive damage to an unsuspecting opponent. Sticky spam is very strong already, but the ability to consistently deal insane damage without even having to expose his own hitbox makes Demoman an absolute powerhouse. While I'm on the topic of map geometry, I have entirely ignored another cornerstone of sticky spam, which also happens to be a pillar of general TF2 theory: choke points. Pretty much all TF2 players who have more than 100 hours have already figured out that the Demoman class greatly benefits from choke points. A few rounds of Dust Bowl is going to teach even the most inexperienced player this fundamental. Any somewhat experienced demo player is going to have a field day on a map like Dust Bowl because it is quite literally all choke point. Other, less terribly designed maps have significantly less choke point, so Demoman isn't quite as oppressive. The key on these maps is positioning. If you combine the aforementioned perfect mid-range for spamming stickies with proper positioning to meet opponents in a choke point, you will demolish the opposition. The reason Demo on Dust Bowl is so easy is because you don't even have to think about your positioning. No matter where you are, your opponent is going to be in a choke point. The secret is, every map is Dust Bowl if you and your team can properly position and kill the enemy in a choke point. Of course, there is difficulty here because most maps have 2 or 3 choke points into a point instead of just one like Dust Bowl. Knowing what choke point or choke points to watch is largely up to map knowledge, game sense, and also pattern recognition. The concept of choke points circles us back to the beginning, where I talked about limiting an opponent's movement by carpeting stickies. Choke points save you ammo and health by doing this for you. All you have to do is hit the target with easy spam. I believe that effectively using map geometry and choke points to your advantage is the most important key to success when playing Demoman. It really is so much easier to get kills on players when they're in a choke point as opposed to when they have space to move around freely. With that being said, I have covered all of the macro when it comes to sticky spam, so I'm going to move on to more specific tips. The first tip I have that is somewhat niche, but still super useful, is that stickies can be synced up similar to how Soldier can sync rockets. If you are not familiar with this concept, it is exactly what it sounds like. 2 projectiles are synced up to land in the same spot at the same time. Soldier achieves this by moving very quickly. Since TF2 physics ignore fundamental laws of actual physics, rockets fired by Soldier will travel at the same fixed speed regardless of Soldier's velocity. This means that the Soldier can sync rockets up by moving very quickly and timing his shots well. Demoman can do the same thing, although it's a bit trickier due to the projectile arc. This is a somewhat useful technique if you are aggressively bombing at a target, although because of the expensive health cost of sticky jumping, as well as Demo wanting to be a bit further away from his target than Soldier, I don't find myself using this very often. Luckily, the projectile arc is going to save the day again. Demoman can sink sticky bombs without even moving at all by adjusting the arc of the bombs. This takes a bit of practice to get used to, and it isn't very effective in direct combat because, well, it's pretty easy to see coming. Sinking stickies like this is most effective as a prediction play. I've described it before as TF2's version of a hard read. I find that landing a sync onto someone this way is easiest when you start off in a spot where your opponent can't see you. Probably the most common use of this type of sync in my gameplay is onto players pushing the cart, because I can clearly predict where they are going to be in a few seconds and can aim my stickies accordingly. Despite its usefulness, you will want to avoid overusing this technique. This is largely because of the high ammo investment for a relatively low success rate play. Sure, you can demolish a target very quickly if you execute the sync correctly, and that's super satisfying, but if you miss your mark or there's simply nothing there, you end up just wasting 2 or 3 sticky bombs. I've already briefly mentioned this third tech, which is syncing a sticky and a pipe. This is far more useful in direct combat, although it still requires a correct prediction. If your opponent strafes away from the sticky bomb, obviously you can't detonate it and deal any damage to them. For that reason, this type of sync works best when you're playing against players with predictable movement, or you're in a situation where you're almost certain a player will move in a certain way. I have found that I land the most sticky pipe syncs when there is an aggressive player such as a scout, soldier, or pyro who wants to get close to me. This is a pretty effective way to make them go away very quickly. Of course, it is easy for me to sit here and act like playing Demo is all sunshine and rainbows. I am able to cherry pick examples of what I'm talking about. There are many things that make sticky spam somewhat more difficult, and a few forbidden strategies that make sticky spam very, very hard. I'm going to start at what I think is the biggest counter, and work my way down to the more minor annoyances. I've already talked about positioning so that major choke points are at your mid-range. In my experience, the existence of a sniper who can aim makes this quite difficult in practice, especially in a casual environment. Ironically, controlling space is a very effective counter to sniper, and what we are trying to do with this positioning is exactly that: maintain map control. However, if you are on offense, or maybe on defense and you had to back up, the sniper is going to have room to hold a sightline. In these situations, you will have to do your best to avoid peeking the sniper, at least until you are able to close the distance enough to be at a more comfortable range for you. I know a lot of people love to complain about Sniper, but Sniper acts as a necessary counterbalance to Demoman. Without Sniper, Demoman would be left unchecked. As much as I would love to elaborate further, I don't want to get too off topic here, so I'll save that rant for another video. The next obstacle blocking you from successful sticky spam is Pyro. Air Blast can obviously be an annoyance by Uno reverse carding your currently traveling sticky bombs, as well as moving around your bombs that are sticking to a surface. As I have mentioned in my matchups video, Demoman versus Pyro is actually very skewed in Demoman's favor, but that doesn't stop Pyro from being extremely annoying at times. Kills that you would have normally secured might slip through your fingers because of Air Blast. On the bright side, if Pyro does manage to Air Blast a sticky bomb back at you, you can just choose not to detonate it. The other trick Pyros have is to delete large groups of your sticky bombs entirely with the detonator or the scorch shot. As usual with Pyro, this is more of an annoyance than a major threat if you are simply aware that it is something that Pyro can do, because with proper positioning, you won't get punished by this. Also, you can spam stickies significantly quicker than Pyro can remove them, and if the Pyro has his secondary out, you can also safely spam mid-range grenades at him as long as he is not running Degreaser. You know what else can delete your sticky bombs? The short circuit. This Dragon Ball Z bullshit has robbed me of my frags, my fun, and most importantly my PG rating on this video because it made me swear. So yeah, I'm not a fan of this weapon. The hitbox for the magic projectile deleting Kamehameha is way too big, and it can be spammed indefinitely if the engineer is sitting on the payload. Luckily, the almighty projectile arc is going to save us once again. Stickies and pipes can be arced over the ball, which will usually catch the engineer off guard, although if the ball is angled upward, the projectiles might still get deleted. In my opinion, this weapon is at its most egregious form when the other team decides to stack engineers, meaning there are enough dispensers to mindlessly spam the right click. Of course, the logical counter to a large number of engineers is Demoman, right? Wrong. It is extremely difficult to make enough space in order to properly spam out Enginess while your entire class identity is being questioned by Goku and Vegeta from Texas. In this pub in particular, this engineer was spamming short circuit quite a bit, so I ended up going Flog Pyro to counter the cooperative engineering. Of course, the other team had to complain about Flog, but if your entire strategy is hiding in a corner and relying on deleting projectiles with a short circuit, you shouldn't be surprised when a Flog Uber clears out your whole team. Turns out the short circuit cannot delete flames, so we can go ahead and add that to the short list of reasons to play Pyro. Okay, let's see here. Okay, I might have gone a bit off script there, sorry about that. Speaking of stickies being removed, I need to briefly mention that stickies can be shot by hit-scan weapons as well. This doesn't really affect the sticky spam playstyle very much, although competent scouts can get some use out of this ability during a fight if they are precise with their aim. On some maps, there are surfaces that sticky bombs cannot stick to. The payload cart, this spot on Badwater Last, and the movable object thing on Pier are all examples of this. This doesn't affect sticky spam too much, but it is useful to know that you have to be a bit more precise when aiming to hit opponents standing in these spots. Another somewhat odd behavior is when a teammate is in the way of your sticky bomb. The bomb will stop traveling in its normal arc and instead bounce off. Watch out for bombs that bounce back, which is somewhat common. The last and probably most useless counter to sticky bombs that I need to cover might surprise you. Sticky bombs themselves. To be more specific, sticky bombs fired by the Scottish Resistance or the Quickie Bomb Launcher have the ability to destroy other sticky bombs instead of just moving them like other explosions. Why exactly Valve decided to do this, I don't know. Is it a very useful ability? In a vacuum, yes, but the Quickie Bomb is just not as good as the Sticky Bomb Launcher because of its halved ammo count, and the Scottish Resistance, well, no comment. Finally, while we're on the topic of useless ways to clear stickies, you can in fact remove a sticky bomb by meleeing it. In the context of an actual game, this is almost never going to actually happen, but hey, now you know. Anyways, I want to get back to more useful information before I wrap up this video, so I'm going to do a speed round and go over all the information that I was not able to fit into this already messy script. Firstly, sticky bombs have a larger explosion radius once they hit the ground. This is a bit complicated, but essentially after the arm timer of a sticky bomb, the explosion radius starts off small and grows larger for 2 seconds, where it reaches the maximum radius of a mid-air sticky bomb. If a sticky gets stuck to an object, its explosion will be full size no matter how long ago it was fired. So ideally, you are better off waiting for your bombs to land before detonating them, although depending on your opponent's movement or how well you aim the sticky bomb, this won't always be possible. The next point is an exception to a rule I discussed earlier in the video. As I said, it is generally better to wait until you're guaranteed damage to detonate your sticky bombs. However, I find there to be 2 main exceptions to this rule. The first, and probably more obvious, is to detonate your bombs if you are certain you're gonna die. When you die without detonating your stickies, they won't deal any damage, so it is worth it to blow them up last second and hope for a frag, or maybe some damage at the very least. The only real downside to doing this is if you don't end up dying, but if you're low on HP, you should probably back up and get healed up anyways, which mean those sticky bombs weren't being very useful in the first place. The other time I ignored this rule is when I have lost track of where all my sticky bombs are, but I want to move up. I don't want to risk accidentally dealing damage to myself, so I just cut my losses and detonate, which will net me a free kill every once in a while, because AoE damage does that sometimes. It's actually kind of ridiculous how many 2-for-1 kills I get playing Demoman, but hey, I'm not complaining, I'm just pointing it out. If NG players can have a sentry that does all the aiming for them, and Pyro players get an air blast hitbox generous enough to be considered a charity, Demoman players can get some freebie AoE kills. Okay, these next 2 tips I have aren't directly about sticky spam, but they are greatly going to improve your ability to sticky spam when you follow them. Firstly, try to get an overheal from a medic before you get aggressive. I try not to give too much advice to people that they have no real control over, because in this case, you are relying on both having a medic in the first place, let alone one who is smart enough to overheal power classes frequently. If you are blessed with a competent medic, just get a buff before you get too aggressive. Demoman can be killed pretty quickly if he is alone, but by being buffed, you are increasing the time it takes to kill you, which means you have more wiggle room to retreat if necessary, or more time to deal damage. Demoman is great at burst damage, and during teamfights he's able to stay useful for much longer than classes like Soldier due to his large amount of ammo, but it also takes a bit longer to start dealing damage with sticky bombs at the start of a fight. So by valuing your life and making sure to get frequent heals and buffs, you are maximizing the value you provide to your team. Speaking of buffs, don't neglect sticky jumping. Jumping as a Demoman is less useful as a Soldier due to the higher health cost, but it is still a useful tool for rolling out, and the cost is mitigated if you do get buffs a lot. Sticky jumping is also useful in a few niche situations, such as chasing vulnerable medics. It can be quite useful as a way to retreat as well, although with the sticky bomb arm timer, it's not quite as useful as like Soldier's rocket jumping or Scout's movement speed. The final tip I have for sticky spam, which I have alluded to multiple times throughout this video, is to integrate your grenade launcher into your spam. Newer players tend to overuse the grenade launcher, almost neglecting their sticky bombs entirely. This is probably because grenades are simpler in concept than a sticky bomb, which requires more planning ahead and an additional input to detonate. Once a demo player realizes the potential of the sticky bomb launcher, they use the grenade launcher solely as a backup weapon instead of a tool to be used in tandem with sticky bombs. I think top level demo players find a delicate balance between the 2 weapons. They are able to use both separate from each other at a proficient level, but when they combine the 2, they are unstoppable. Alright, I am out of stuff to talk about when it comes to sticky spam, so that'll be all for today. As I said earlier, I plan on making a video about sticky traps, so stay tuned for that, and let me know in the comments if there's anything you think I missed or you would like to see mentioned in a future video. Anyways, thank you for watching the video.